So if you want to know what's going to happen next in the United States, it's time to look north. Canada is the ghost of our Christmas future. So with that in mind, it's worth taking a look at what is happening right now in Canada's schools, because you are certain to see all of it in your children's schools very soon. So this week, videos surfaced on the internet from a place called Trafalgar High School in Oakville, Ontario. That's right across the lake from Niagara Falls. These videos show a teacher called Stephen Hanna, who apparently has been employed at Trafalgar High for several years. Recently, Hanna decided to dress like a woman, or more precisely, as a grotesque caricature of a woman, not a real woman, but a kind of pneumatically inflated Marilyn Monroe look-alike. As part of his costume, Hanna strapped on a pair of gigantic prosthetic breasts, each the size of a 10-pound watermelon. We're not exaggerating here. They're visible from at least 100 yards away, if not from space. We'll show you the picture we are right now on the screen. But here's the thing. Hanna isn't doing this in private, in his home, in restaurants and clubs. If he were, we would not be mentioning it on the show because it would not be our business. Have fun, Stephen Hanna. No. Stephen Hanna is doing it in class, in front of children. As the Canadian journalist Jonathan Kay put it, Hanna has been dressing like this for a while, but only recently have students within the school gone public with this fact. So they've been enduring this for a while. Kay also notes that Hanna's costume is based on the style of Japanese internet pornography, which translates roughly into English as exploding milk porn. So what's going on here? Well, you know exactly what's going on here. Let's stop pretending. Women may not see it right away because generally their lives are not defined by their sex drives. But if you're a man, you get it instantly. What is this about? It's about sex. Stephen Hanna is enlisting other people's children in his sexual fantasies. That's why he's doing this in class. Having an audience of children gives Stephen Hanna a sexual charge. He's getting off on this. There's no question about it. This is the guy in the van trying to give your sixth grader candy. This is the flasher in the park. This guy is a pervert. He should not be within 500 yards of children, period. He's a threat to children. Now, there have always been threats to children. In every society, there are people like this. And every society deals with them swiftly and very harshly, but no longer in the West. Now, people like this are not punished. They are celebrated and then protected. Trafalgar High School, which is public, it's funded by Canadian taxpayers, is vigorously defending his behavior and threatening anyone who notices. So is the Halton District School Board, which oversees the school. They just sent us the statement, and we're quoting. The school board recognizes the rights of the parents, staff, students, guardians, community members to equitable treatment without discrimination based upon gender identity and gender expression. Gender identity and gender expression are protected grounds under the Ontario Human Rights Code. Oh, the Human Rights Code. Really? Where are the rights of the kids? There are none. In other words, if you complain, if you're a parent who complains about Stephen Hanna enlisting your children in his sexual fantasies, you are the criminal. You are breaking Canadian law. For the most part, the Canadian media, the most supine media that speaks English, are siding with Stephen Hanna, the sicko. Other than the noble exceptions of Jonathan Kay, who we just quoted, and a small feminist blog called Redux, nobody is covering what Stephen Hanna is doing to kids sexually. The rest are effectively defending it. The Toronto Sun, for example, went with this headline. School board prepares for backlash over trans high school teacher. Oh, backlash. Trans high school teacher. He's protected. No, he's a freaking weirdo wagging fake breasts in the face of your children because it titillates him. And if you complain about that, you're the problem. So the problem is parents, not the pervert in the classroom. It's hard to believe this is happening, but we're sad to tell you it's not just happening in Canada. You see versions of it everywhere, including in this country. And to be clear, what this is, children being used as props in the sexual fantasies of adults. Children being used as props in the sexual fantasies of adults. Are you okay with that? Is any normal person okay with that? It's completely wrong. It's utterly outside the bounds of what's acceptable. It's not a close call. And yet suddenly teachers, licensed teachers, are bragging about it on social media.
I have had multiple students come out to me, not just with their sexuality, but also with their gender identity. It's one of the reasons I think it's so important to be out and loud and proud.
I teach my elementary school students about gender identity. Some people are girls, some are boys, some are both, some are neither.
I might tell this kid, we do have a flag in the class that you can pledge your allegiance to. And he looks around and he goes, oh, that one?
So again, if you were walking through the park with your kids and a stranger came up and started talking to them, say to your 5th grader, your 5-year-old, or even your 14-year-old, about sex, what would you do? Well, you would call the police, of course. That's not allowed. It's a crime because they're children. But teachers are allowed to do it and then to brag about it. And it's not stopping with classroom instruction. All over the country, adults are forcing children to attend drag shows. Watch. So just to be clear, as if it's not clear, and somehow we're in such a haze that it isn't clear to a lot of people, these are sexual fantasies playing out in public. And on one hand, we've all sort of agreed that's fine, go do your thing. But you are not allowed to bring children into your sexual fantasies because that's a species of child molestation. You can be fully clothed when it happens. It doesn't make it any less abusive or any less immoral. They're children. Keep children away from your sex life, comma, sicko. There was never any question about that. But now there is. And it's a bit of a tip-off that the same people conducting it are now trying to tell you that you can't use the word pedophile. Wonder why. Watch this.
Want to talk about minor attracted persons because they are probably the most vilified population of folks in our culture. You may have noticed that I'm using the term minor attracted persons, sometimes abbreviated to MAPS, instead of the more commonly used term pedophile.
MAP advocacy groups like Before You Act have advocated for use of the term MAP. They've advocated for it primarily because it's less stigmatizing than other terms like pedophile. A lot of people, when they hear the term pedophile, they automatically assume that it means a sex offender. And that isn't true, and it leads to a lot of misconceptions about attractions toward minors.
That last clip was from the Protesia Foundation, which you think federal law enforcement were taking a very close look at, and its donors. Child molestation is a crime for a reason. It destroys people. You can't use children as sexual objects. Now, the first woman you heard from, Alan Walker, worked at Old Dominion University in Virginia. She was fired after the video came out. But shortly after, Johns Hopkins hired her as a postdoc. So she got promoted. She was rewarded for making excuses for child molestation? And it's not just academics. You see book publishers aggressively trying to sexualize children. Have you taken a look at young adult books recently? Most are just stupid. Some are flat out pornographic. In Fairfax, Virginia last year, a mother informed her school board that 2 books in the school's library, one called Gender Queer, another called Lawn Boy, written for 7th graders, contained material that you don't need to be a prude to think, wow, this is not, something's going on here. According to ABC News, the book Gender Queer, quote, contains explicit illustrations of oral sex and masturbation. The novel Lawn Boy contains graphic depictions of sex between men and children. So why are they pushing this on kids? Well, of course, to prime them for sexual exploitation. And anyone who said that's a puritanical take on this, you're being hysterical, get real. Get real. What's the point of pushing pornography on children except to sexualize them and take advantage of them? And they're telling us it's not really child molestation? By the way, everyone in charge seems to be fully behind this. Oh, it's so dark. And then, of course, there's the medical angle. At Boston Children's Hospital, they're cutting the breasts off of healthy children. According to a paper published in the Journal of Clinical Medicine, Boston's Children's Hospital did, we're quoting, 177 gender-affirming double mastectomy surgeries in recent years. Roughly half of them were on girls, 15 to 18. Similar gender-affirming treatments, specifically chemical castration, were offered for many years in Britain. We're not the first to do this, at their infamous Tavistock Child Identity Clinic. Now, Britain's government just announced it is closing Tavistock. Why? Because they've been sued by more than 1,000 families who allege that, quote, children and young adolescents were rushed into treatment and therefore, quote, suffered life-changing and in some cases irreversible effects. They should have known that. The data have been out for a long time, but people with a sexual agenda, not a political agenda, a sexual agenda, have pushed so hard to make this legal and then fashionable that we've ignored it. But the numbers have been there. In 2011, researchers in Sweden released the results of a study that lasted 3 decades. That study found that people who underwent, quote, gender-affirming surgery were 19 times more likely to kill themselves than people who hadn't, the general population. So instead of covering all this, that's not a story, really? Sexualizing children, mutilating their genitals because you get off on it? Our media is not covering this at all. They're encouraging it, and they're hiding the reality behind euphemisms. They're referring to castration as, quote, gender-affirming care. Castration of children.
Gender-affirming mental and medical care for minors.
Often provide gender-affirming care to transgender people.
And gender-affirming care.
Seeking to ban gender-affirming medical care for transgender youth.
Efforts to restrict access to gender-affirming care.
Life-saving gender-affirming care for transgender people.
Life-saving gender-affirming care. Really, can you slow down a little bit and tell me what exactly that entails? Can you be a lot more specific? Can you bring pictures in? Show me what it looks like. Can you do that? What exactly are teachers talking to my kids about? What's a human sexuality lecture look like in my 6th graders class? Why don't you tell me? Speak slowly so I can take notes. The reality of all this, behind the euphemism, is horrifying. It's sexualizing children. And they go completely hysterical when you point that out because it's true. And the real question is, why is everyone else putting up with this? In a healthy country with an intact social fabric, neighborhood dads would mete out instant justice to anyone who even thought about sexualizing their kids. And if you doubt that, go ahead and try it in Bulgaria or South Africa or the Solomon Islands. Good luck. Let us know how that ends if you can still speak. People won't put up with it because the instinct to protect your children is the deepest of all human instincts, and it has to be. Of course, it has to be. But it's been all but eliminated in the West. Parents in this country and in Canada are far more passive. Why? Because they haven't recognized this phenomenon for what it is. They believe it's some kind of political movement, somehow related to the liberation struggle for trans rights, and therefore something you're not allowed to complain about or you're a bigot, and all the moms think you're bad. But it's not a liberation struggle. There is no liberation struggle. The battle for trans rights is long over. Trans people have rights. They can dress any way they like. And not only is that entirely legal, most Americans have no interest whatsoever in interfering with it at all. This is a fundamentally live and let live country, and it always has been. That's the deal we've always had. You do your thing, I'll do mine, and we'll both leave one another alone. And the overwhelming majority of the American population still favors that. Republican, Democrat, Independent, everybody's for that. But that's not what this is at all. These are not people who want to leave you alone or your kids alone. These are weirdos getting creepy with other people's children. That's exactly what it is. Say it. Say it. That's what it is.